Welcome back. It is another episode of All or Nothing. I'm your host, Jacob Harris, and today I'm joined by Connor Walsh and CEO of PED Test Australia, Alison Craven. And today we're going to talk about a few different things, mainly PED Test Australia related information. And also Connor has a few questions that came through for Instagram, and we're going to discuss performance enhancing drugs and a few other things. I would like to say, first of all, thank you for coming on, Connor.
Thanks for having me once again, Jacob.
A pleasure as always. Hopefully the weather or the conditions are a little bit better today.
It's a little better than last time. A little bit better.
A little bit better. And Alison, thank you for being here.
No worries.
I would like to start by immediately heading into some questions because they're probably one of the main things that we want to talk about here. And we're going to start with Connor, but we will move into some of it with Alison as well. The one I actually want to ask is one that I got on my Instagram, and then you can move into some of the ones that you got. But I actually got a question from someone saying, and I found this interesting because Alison will be able to weigh in on this as well, but their question was, what would you say is the most, I think they phrased it as addictive, or is it addictive? I think the question was, I think they said addictive. I found this very, very interesting. It was, what is the most addictive PED category in your experience? And then they wrote, for example, SARMs, and then they wrote diuretics, which I found interesting. I think you could answer this from an interesting perspective, and then also Alison as well.
Yeah, look, it's a very difficult question to answer, to be honest. I think a lot of it's going to come down to what drives the individual. Some people take performance-enhancing drugs as a means of physique improvement, into which case potentially you would say something like a trenbolone or something that is quite well known for quite rapid changes in the way the body looks, whereas other people may particularly like the way a growth hormone makes them feel. It gives them, a younger feeling. So in that case, they might find something like the growth hormone to be more addictive. None of these drugs are physically addictive in terms of, giving withdrawals. However, obviously with things like your hormones, having HPTA shut down, you can get obviously ill side effects when you cease them. But yeah, it's quite a difficult question to answer because I think it really is going to come down to the individual and what they perceive to get from each compound and how important that is to them. It's not obviously like alcohol or heroin or methamphetamine where you're going to have physical withdrawals of stopping, but it is definitely going to have some impacts in some of the activities that you're doing in your life and potentially lower your quality of life, which some people may not be able to kind of part ways with. So in that way, I guess it could be considered addictive, but I wouldn't particularly call any PED more addictive than the next.
Interesting answer. And then maybe, I guess, in your experience working with them, Alison, from that perspective, do you find that you're obviously getting a lot of samples and things from people, and you probably hear some people say some things to you. Do you find that you're getting more of anything in particular?
It's not really my wheelhouse, the psychology of it all, but I think it's more the body dysmorphia is more of an issue than the biological, the action of the drug. I think a lot of it is all psychological.
I think maybe the idea behind it and possibly even the psychology behind the question could have even been, because I know this person, maybe it was possibly even from a perspective of, I maybe want to try some. Should I avoid any of the addictive ones? But it sounds like obviously they can all be addictive in their own way. And I mean, you could categorize it in so many different ways, right? You could even say that people are probably more addicted to testosterone than anything, because some people will come off other compounds and just stay on testosterone year round. Is it then more addictive because that's what they stay on? It's just, yeah.
I think maybe for someone like that, it's good to look at whether their mental health, if they have an addictive personality and they already have issues with other drugs, those same sort of issues can carry across to PED use. Like if you don't know when to stop, if you can't objectively see when your life is being negatively affected by something you're doing, then that can carry over into PEDs.
Sure.
Interesting. The other question I received was BPC 157, oral or injection, which is better?
Well, they both have benefits. A lot's going to come down to user preference. Obviously, oral is going to be a lot more user-friendly to many people that are not willing to use needles. BPC is derived from human gastric juices, so there is a direct benefit on the stomach and perhaps possibly even a better benefit when BPC is consumed orally from that perspective. Most people, when consuming it for an injury, are going to use it via injection and most likely shoot fairly local to the injury. So I guess it's kind of going to come down to what you're using the BPC for and whether or not you're willing to use needles in the first place, because that's going to answer the question for most people.
Do you have anything to say on this one, Alison? No?
No.
Well, they're the two questions that I had, and I found them interesting because they're different, but also because I know a few people have talked about using BPC.
It's very popular on TikTok at the moment.
Yes, I've heard it a little bit. I heard it a lot before then. I know a few people have seen some good results with it. But at that point, if you were to categorize it as well, just to clarify it for anyone who's not completely aware of, it's not an anabolic steroid. It's a peptide, is that right?
It's a peptide hormone, but it is still banned by WADA or SADA, whatever governing bodies of your tested sports are, so it would still be classed a performance-enhancing drug and not able to be used if you're in tested competition.
Okay. And so what I'll do is give you a little bit of time to, if you want to get up some of what you have, Connor, and we'll move over to you, Alison, CEO of PED Test Australia. You can find PED Test Australia on Instagram as well, which I haven't mentioned, but I'm mentioning now. And also, while we're at it, Alison somehow doubles with another company, which is Bulk Gym Chalk as well. So if you're looking for some chalk and you want to buy it in bulk, or maybe just want good gym chalk, find them on Instagram as well. I would like to ask you about, you mentioned the quarterly results.
Yep. So we put out statistics. We do a yearly one, and then we usually do a quarterly or half yearly to sort of give people an idea of what kind of quality of steroids are being produced in Australia and whether it is changing over time, because it does change a lot. Basically, any of our customers can report back to us results of their kits. So if they test something, they'll send me a photograph of the results and tell me the brand and the dosage and whatnot. We don't tend to track where they're from, so where they've been bought, like what particular site. But after time, you kind of get to know where most of these are from. So this quarter so far, there's been a lot of scamming that's taken off at the moment. So there's a whole group of websites online that all started scamming at the same time. So they're all run by the same people. So it's the Oz Pharmacy, Oz Juice group of websites are all running a financial scam right now. So it's very much, buy an order, it doesn't arrive. They say Ozpost lost it, pay again. You pay more, oh no, it's lost again. And they just basically scamming lots of money out of people without something turning up. So they were selling, some of these sites, legitimate gear up to January and even into February. And then they've all suddenly at the same time gone into doing a financial scam. So, and there's another couple of websites that we're watching closely right now because it looks like they may be doing the same thing, but we're waiting to see. But in terms of stats, so this quarter so far, we've received 103 oral steroid results and 217 oils. Out of all of those, for the orals, the confirmed positive results, 64 of them. So that's about 62% of all orals are legit, which is not great. 17 of those were swapped with something else. So usually Anavar swapped with D-Bol or that sort of a thing. So that's about 17% of all the orals were swapped. And then there was 9 that were completely no steroid at all. So that's just under 10% of all the orals have nothing in them. And then there was 13 that were inconclusive. So inconclusive means there's either too much filler or dye in their product to be able to discern the steroid colour correctly, or perhaps the person doing the test has put too much in, so there's too much of a reaction and the colours are too dark, you can't tell. So there's about 13% that we can't determine one way or the other. So out of that, of those 103 results, 18 brands are in that.
18.
18 different brands. Only one is known as a scam. So that's 18 brands, and quite a lot of those aren't good,
Yep.
but they're not known as scam brands. And then with the oils, you've got 73% were legit. So only 3/4 of all the oils that we saw were good. 30 were swapped, which is about 15%. And we saw 9 that had zero steroid in it at all, which is about 4%.
I have seen in blood work actually quite recently a few people that have been on
Yeah.
stuff and have come back as completely natural testosterone readings. So it's definitely
Yep.
something that's.
And we've
I've
seen
noted.
that a lot with compounding pharmacy, like on a script, TRT, they go to. There's 2 particular compounding pharmacies in the East Coast that sell hormone replacement that has nothing in it.
Yeah, wow.
So that's,
And from what I've seen,
Yeah.
very expensive too.
yeah,
Very, very expensive.
yeah. And then those 217 results, that's 90 brands we've seen in 4 months. And we've got probably 120 brands in the database. So there's a lot of brands getting around right now, and 11 of those are known to be scam brands. But yeah, there's only 73% are looking okay, and that's just presence. That's not potency. So 73 presence are okay. When you get to the potency, only 45% were correctly dosed.
So when you say, like with the potency, only 45% were correctly dosed, like what's the like idea behind that sort of thing happening to begin with? Is it people just, or is it just a mixture of people essentially trying to like water down what they're selling, or just what they're even having or what they're creating is just bad to begin with?
Most of the time, the brands aren't trying to scam anyone. But the raws you get from China vary from batch to batch all the time. There's no quality control. There's no testing regime in place in China. Anyone in China sends you a lab result saying that their raws are fantastic, you just throw it in the garbage. It's not worth even looking at. But if you get a raw in that varies by a couple of percent, by the time you dilute that down, that margin of error gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So a few percent variation in the raws ends up being a lot of percent variation in the finished product.
So what's the idea with them? Like, I mean, not that you can speak for this, but it's interesting that there's lack of quality control there. Would it not be more, because they're obviously trying to sell a product,
They don't
right?
care. They don't have to.
Yeah, okay.
It's
You just
an
think they
underground
would.
illegal product. Why would you need quality control?
no
People are going to
receipts.
buy it no matter what.
Interesting though, right? Because that's like, it's like when you get, not that I would ever do any other illegal drugs, but when I did, I usually cared about the quality of them.
Yeah.
and this seems like something you would care about a lot more, right? Because it's not just connected to like, you don't take performance enhancing drugs just to feel good, right? They're performance enhancing for a reason. So if you're not seeing the benefit from them, then you're not really going to probably keep on buying it.
I think one of the big issues is that the majority of people using performance-enhancing drugs aren't athletes. They're just normal people who have been told that this is how they get a six-pack and a bicep vein for the beach. So they just don't have that level of care. They've just been told this is what to take, so they take it. I think, or at least what I see amongst the athletes, the people that are actually serious about this, they're the ones more likely to do the testing and make sure that they're getting the quality stuff. I see it much more frequent that you're just everyday Joes around the gym using performance-enhancing drugs, predominantly steroids, just going to get their hands on whatever they can get their hands on. So a lot of people they only have one source. They've only got the one big guy at their gym that sells the gear that they go up to and ask, and that's all they can get. So they often won't even know what the difference between something good and bad is. And a lot of people don't do blood work, so a lot of people will never know that they're not on anything because they've never thought to pull their testosterone levels or any androgen or estrogen levels or anything like that to see if there's actually been a change in hormone levels from the hormones that they've been taking.
And there was quite a thing for a while of if you complained to a supplier and said, this isn't working, there was the whole, you must be a poor responder, which is what one of the compounding pharmacies said, which to me is like massive, like,
Poor
oh my God,
responder
red
to
flag.
TRT.
You're a poor responder. Yeah.
Okay.
I love that. There's nothing better than just like blaming like your genetics. Just
Your
like,
genetics suck. This isn't us.
our stuff's good. Your shit is the problem. That's actually amazing. I can't believe that they would even take that route with it as well. But I'm blown away by that. I guess there's too much trust, right?
Yes.
This will be quality, especially when it comes with the label and everything. How funny is that? This was a total, just a quick side note, but someone brought up the other day, I think Lane Norton was talking about this, about something like there was a percentage behind it. I'm not going to try and quote it because I can't remember, but it was to do with nutrition labels. There's a certain percentage where they can just be completely off.
Yep.
And I guess to an extent, right, it's like you don't expect every single thing to be down to like there's this much mashed potato in this meal, it's 100%. But to an extent, that blows you away, right? You're a little bit like, oh, wow. So like I'm reading something that's like 6.6 grams of protein, and it's probably not even that. Most of the time, that's almost like probably what it's not even close. It has to be 6.8 or 6.9. And it's like, it's not a huge deal on that scale. But if you spread that across a day, things are probably looking a little bit differently.
I don't know about you, but if you've ever been like a Spud Shed or one of those more like budget shops that have some of the more wacky foods and looked at some of the nutritional labels and just gone, that's not right. There's no way that that's right.
I saw one the other day.
Times.
I have a client who owns a shop in Rockingham City, and the label said 30 milligrams of carbohydrates. And I was like,
wow,
you think someone would have picked up on that? But anyway, that's really interesting. So, I mean, and you may have already mentioned this, but I guess quarterly, how many samples did you say you received?
It was 217 oils and 103 orals.
Wow. Okay. And so, if someone was to be, say, someone was, heard this and thought, Jesus, maybe I've got fake China liquid. If they were interested in getting whatever they have tested, how easy is it for them to do so, like through PED Test? Like, is it just like you guys through your website, or?
Yep, through the website. Just buy a kit and test it. And if you have any questions about the result or need any help interpreting it, you just send it through to Instagram or via email, and we help you figure it out. Because we've got such a massive database and we've seen, thousands and thousands of results, it's usually pretty quick for us to point out, okay, you've either put too much in, or this is what's going on, or that's contaminated with Test P. Test U is a big one at the moment that gets put into just about everything. So there's a lot of stuff, we'll recognise it. Like to the point where I saw 2 results the other day, I'm like, that's either exactly the same brand with a different label, or they've got exactly the same supplier. You can tell from the characteristics of it after a while. So it's very easy to do the kit results. It's never going to be as good as lab analysis, but it's a fantastic screening tool. So what you should be doing is you test every single batch you buy, especially if you trust the supplier, because every single one of those scam websites was a trusted supplier at one point. Every single one of them. So don't just blindly believe that you're getting the same thing every time. You test every single batch and you monitor how the quality goes up and down, and then you can tell straight away when it's starting to be a scam as soon as it's gone bunk, before you've wasted another few cycles wondering what's going wrong. Like, you'll be able to see it straight away.
Yeah, interesting. And because we're going to wrap this up and take a break, and at some point I imagine I'll be able to work in some really quirky advertisements at this point. But, mentioning that and giving people that option to now know that that's where they can go, and that's how you kind of go about things. How often is it that you get something, and it is the real deal? Like, is it often, do you get quite a lot of, obviously you've talked about percentages before, but do you get a small percentage of things where it's just really, really, really good product?
I would say over the last 2 years, so we've seen 120, maybe 100, up to 140 different brands active in Australia at the same time. Out of all of those, there is 2 that have been consistent.
And are you able to recommend those brands?
No, I can't.
Okay.
I'm not
Maybe
legally
later,
allowed.
off camera.
But just to give you an idea, there's only 2 we've seen. So your chances of finding them, good luck.
Yeah.
But does that mean that someone
need to test everything?
Could contact you guys and ask for a recommendation? Hey, no, they can't even do that.
No, we're not allowed to.
Yeah, interesting.
We're not allowed to promote drug use. We can tell you who the scammers are. We can tell you if what you've bought is garbage. We can tell you if you say, look, I've bought this brand, give me their specific statistics.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Okay, so that helps, right? So that's good. Does that mean someone could buy a brand and at least ask for your advice? Like, is this, and then you can say, well, we've got some bad results from that brand.
Yeah.
Okay.
To give you an idea, one of the reasons we don't promote anything, apart from the fact that it's illegal, there's a brand at the moment that everyone swore by is fantastic, it's wonderful, best results ever, people rave about it online. The last 2 weeks, every one of their orals has been bunk. Suddenly, switched, gone from fantastic to complete shit. So you can't recommend anybody because you don't know. Literally tomorrow it could go to hell and they start scamming people. And it happens constantly. That's why there's only the 2 brands we've ever seen that haven't done it. So, and half the time, the supplier themselves, they don't know if it's good or not. They're trusting whoever in China is sending them stuff in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
as much as you trust the brand, you can't trust the person they're getting it from.
There's lots of channels for it to go through, which makes it more difficult.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and we're going to go to commercial. All right, we are back. Just before the break, we were talking about some of the quarterly results that PED Test Australia had, and Alison was giving us kind of a summary of that, and Connor had a few questions on some of the things we wanted to touch on, so I'm going to now allow you to do so, sir.
Yeah, so firstly, I'd just like to know if there were any compounds in particular that you were noticing were more heavily faked, and any compounds that people had a much better chance, say, of getting what they were, hoping to get.
Probably the best ones that we see are probably your MAST P and Test P are usually pretty good. You don't often get them faked. Test E at the moment, you see a lot of Test U and Test P contamination or swapping going on. That didn't happen a lot last year, but we're seeing it happen quite a bit at the beginning of this year. Primo's a hard one.
Yeah.
That one's really difficult.
Yep.
Not only because it's very often faked and underdosed, but there's a lot of places that blend it.
Yep.
And because Primo, when you test it, gives a very dark reaction, you can blend in a bit of Test E or a bit of MAST E or whatever in it, and you're not necessarily going to know. It'll just look like it's a bit weak.
Yep.
So if you're testing Primo, if you've got a lot of vials of it or it's going to be used by a female, then it's good to get a backup lab analysis. If it looks positive, great, then send it off for analysis to double check.
Is Janashek the only place that you can still get analysis from, or is there something local?
They're the only ones that I would trust, is Janashek. We are looking into getting an Australian-based one up and running.
That would be awesome.
So, but that's
very cool.
That's going to be a long process, but
Yep.
we're hoping to get that set up and running as well. Sustanon is a good one in terms of testing that. Our kits will tell you if it's in the ballpark of a good blend, and you can see if it's just Test P only, you can tell. If it's been swapped out with Test E or C, you can tell. But yeah, if you want to know exactly what the blend is, you have to send that off for analysis as well.
Just a question on you said Test E, and then you were saying a lot of like Test U and things like that as well. Didn't last year, you are this year? Is that
Yeah.
is that right?
Yeah.
Why do you think, is there any kind of theory behind why that is?
A lot of, even though there's tons of brands in Australia, where they're all getting the raws from, there aren't that many. So in China, there's not that many facilities that make steroids. So you have a small number of original suppliers making the raws, and then that gets sent out to a large number of brands in Australia. So if one of them has contaminated gear, like they've got ester, contamination across the production lines, or they're swapping something around, that one batch that they make then becomes a dozen brands in Australia. So it may only be a one-off problem at the start, but you're going to see it a lot through a lot of Australia. So it becomes this, its scales of magnitude gets amplified. So like when I had a chat to Janashik, they were saying there was one lot of a particular drug that was faked or swapped way back when, and they're still seeing that exact same batch pop up. It's still, because they produce so much in one go, by the time it gets out to all its eventual end customers, it can stick around for quite a long time.
You were saying even at like a pharmaceutical level though, some of the, I think you said that some of the TRT and that you were saying wasn't...
Yes. So we had no concept that this even happened. No one had ever heard of this. And then it wasn't until, some crazy person thought they would test their compounding pharmacy legit TRT prescription Test E with a kit. And they did, and there was nothing in it. So they freaked out. They contacted us. We started talking around, and there was a couple of guys, bodybuilders over east, that contacted us and said, look, we're seeing this quite a bit too. So we put out a call to our followers on Instagram, look, if you've got it, compounding TRT stuff, please test it. And we started getting all these bunk results rolling in. And there was one other place as well that their results were very chemically contaminated. It looked like very poor quality Chinese raws were being used, underground stuff. So it becomes a question of, is the chemist not importing the raws they use for this and saving money, or are they getting diverted somewhere? Like, what's going on? Where is the steroid going?
I have seen some really weird prescriptions from people that I can't see how they're legally able to happen in Australia. Potentially, I have seen a trenbolone prescribed, and I have seen IGF-1 LR3 prescribed with an exorbitant price tag of $1,500 for 1 milligram.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand how this is happening, because as far as I'm aware, it's not legal in Australia.
Yeah. Well, this is, even if you're completely legal, you have a proper TRT prescription, and there's these two main big compounding pharmacies over east that you go to. They will sell you, one of their things is you walk in and they're like, oh, sorry, we don't have Bayer, whatever, the usual stuff. We've got our own that we make. You should use this instead. And it's got nothing in it. There have been multiple complaints put in to AFRA, which is the body that manages this stuff. But essentially, compounding pharmacies kind of get away with it because they're almost self-regulated. There's not a lot of oversight on them. So if you have got something from a compounding pharmacy, test it. If it looks like it doesn't have steroid in it, get your bloods done, because if your bloods are, bottomed out, then that's enough proof, and report them to AFRA, because there needs to be enough of this evidence of it being an ongoing problem for them to act on it. But it's not surprising this has happened, because similar stuff has happened before with compounding pharmacies. This is not the first time in history this sort of stuff's gone on.
And so this is happening to people. Obviously, people are getting prescribed TRT, using it, and then you're saying there's nothing in it.
Yep.
So it's then, I guess, up to someone to go, well, I don't feel like anything's changed, and maybe I need to look into like getting this tested, because obviously otherwise why would they?
Yeah.
But then there's also like an area of, because you have to wonder now, if this has happened quite a few times before, is there an area of placebo with people? Is there people that must be taking it?
110%.
Yeah.
I just dealt with a client who had no... Actually, there was a little bit of shutdown. So there was something going on, but the testosterone he was taking was not testosterone. And he didn't realise until we ran blood work. So,
wow.
110%.
It's interesting. I wonder where... Because there's almost that side of it, right? If you're under the impression that you are, we all know that testosterone isn't like pre-workout, but people tend to train a bit harder on it, right? So does that almost mean, to an extent, some people could actually be seeing progress simply because they're under the impression that they have something driving it?
Absolutely.
110%.
That's just curious in itself, right? Almost like it's someone actually just pushing hard like they could have if they had nothing in their system. And I think that's just, for me, the placebo side of it's crazy, because now that you've come across someone who's had that, you have to think it must be in the hundreds, thousands of people who are taking prescribed.
I would never, until I've recently, thought if I was getting something from a pharmacy that I'd have to test it to confirm potency. I just don't think that would cross anyone's mind. When have you ever gone to the pharmacy, picked up some antibiotics and said, hang on, let me just go get a drug test for these antibiotics because I'm not 100% sure that they're going to be 100%.
But this is across the board, right? Like, what other drugs can we completely rely on?
We've heard that there's also some issues with their medicinal marijuana.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
As in
not having the side effects it should. So its amount of THC is not quite right. So, but
as in, is not as strong as it should be, or people having negative side effects?
Having negative side effects.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, there's a lot of stuff that if you get it from a compounding pharmacy and it's made by them, probably best you don't. Ask for the Bayer or whatever, pre-packed syringes, whatever it is that's made pharmaceutically somewhere else. Get that from them. And if they say we don't have it in stock, go somewhere else. Don't use their stuff.
Well, I thought we were still talking about medical marijuana because I was going to say I've always just trusted me mate Dave who grows it in his backyard because he tested himself and he reckons it's pretty good.
As a side note, we have kits where you can test your own marijuana to see whether it is CBD or THC dominant. Just as an aside.
Absolutely. And I don't. This has got me really thinking though, because we know what's prescribed out there. It goes far beyond even medical marijuana, right? Like think about any like people who are on like opioids and antidepressants and stuff. At what point is that stuff maybe?
I mean, even like the Ritalin, dexamphetamine is very common, very very common. I'm sure. I'm sure there's probably some of that going on in that as well. So
if you're buying it and it's been made by a compounding pharmacy, be suspicious. I mean, there's some that are great, but I know there's some that definitely aren't.
Well, this is where and I guess this is still in relation to PED Test Australia. You guys obviously have those kits you're saying for medical marijuana, and I doubt that you're ever going to get to a point where you're going to bring them out for everything. But what would someone even do in that situation? Let's say someone, not that this is on the topic of steroids, but let's say we're talking about something like Ritalin. Where is there other companies that do something similar to what you do? Like how many companies are open enough to test those things? Obviously you don't test Ritalin, but are you aware of any other people that practice similar to what you're doing, where they allow people to test their prescriptions and things like that? Because if it's not very common, how do people do it?
I don't think it's an issue with the stuff that is made by your big pharmaceutical companies. They're fine.
Yeah, okay.
They've got quality control in place and they have to conform to regulations and whatever. It's just the compounding pharmacies that make their own shit. They're the ones that are the issue.
Backyard chemists, basically.
Yeah.
Semi-legal backyard chemists.
Semi-legal backyard chemists.
Legal, but I'm sure they're probably doing some things that aren't quite legal. At least by the sounds of it. At least PED Test Australia make it look that way.
Yeah. I was going to say I find this. I think a lot of people are going to find this pretty interesting because it's crazy to think, especially
very startling.
Yeah,
Scary.
The prescription stuff blows your mind. Because even when I've been through periods of thinking about, it's funny, right? You have those conversations with people about jumping on, and you'll talk to someone about getting on gear, and they'll go, "Oh, if I was going to do it, I'd get like the prescription stuff, as if it's just like something you can get anywhere. I want to get the stuff from the doctor if I'm going to do it, to make sure that it's the right stuff.
Because he's going to give you enough to make
and
it
then
gigantic.
Absolutely.
Even on a side note, people will try and source pharmaceutical stuff on the underground, and I would personally believe you could maybe add in on this, that I would say pharmaceutical stuff sourced on the underground is probably more likely to be fake and relabeled than pharmaceutical. You're probably better off just going for trusted UGL if you're trying to source
anything
pharmaceutical.
Pharmaceutical underground, it's all fake.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I hear that very regularly. I sourced pharma.
Yep. And
Probably
it can be
didn't. Someone just printed a label.
Glass vials with hologram stickers and codes you verified on the website. Still shit. Still fake.
Doesn't it just get to you though? When I found out about the nutritional label thing, I had a bad day for the rest of my day. I was like, you're telling me
my macros weren't 100%
that my
right
macros
today?
100%? Why am I even counting them at this point? That must have, when you found that out, that must have destroyed you. You've been counting for years.
Nah, mate. I just stick to Whole Foods. You don't have that problem.
Oh, that's a good way to go about it. All right, okay, fair enough. All right. Well, surely every now and then but you're telling me the continental gravy doesn't have exactly 0.05 grams of sodium in it? Because that's devastating.
It's ruining your gains, Jacob.
Okay, I should have got it tested.
Those lack of carbs are killing your muscles.
So basically, to create some form of summary, we have spoken about the quarterly results with PED Test Australia and some of the interesting things on the market out there that I wasn't aware of, and some of the things that you might get from your doctor that you might not be aware of. And I guess I would like to move into a little space to end it with, in terms of maybe a little bit of advice, but loose advice because of how we have to be careful of how we say it. And I guess, Connor, in your opinion, if someone was to come to you and their first question was like, I want to hop on like straight away, give me all the advice you can about getting everything I can. The psychology behind how you would approach that, I find to be interesting, right? Because I feel like, especially with yourself, you're not going to be like, sweet as, man, here's what's in my man bag, straight into your leg, right? You're more than likely going to approach it with, why do you want to do that? Let's discuss those things first. Alison had mentioned body dysmorphia before, which I think is probably people's biggest one.
For sure.
Could you maybe expand on, like, you've probably had that. You've probably had people come to you with that. What's your approach from like that standpoint, and how you maybe try to get them to understand the choice they actually want to make?
Yep. First of all, I would put a 5-year goal and plan first. Establish why you're looking to take performance-enhancing drugs in the first place. Is it physique reasons? Is it performance reasons? Are you trying to reach a certain level of competition? Whatnot? Kind of figure out what needs to happen over those next 5 years. If performance-enhancing drugs are a part of that, maybe consider all the other parts of it and see if you're actually going to be able to adhere to and sustain all the other aspects that are involved in whatever journey you're about to partake on. And then have a realistic kind of conversation with yourself, and sit down and see if you truly are ready to take on what will be a life-changing potential health situation. You quite likely, anyone that is considering steroids should probably enter with the assumption that they will end up on TRT. Not always going to be the case, but I think you should enter with a worst case scenario mindset so that you're expecting the worst outcome. And if that's something that you truly think is worth if the juice is worth the squeeze for you, then perhaps you are ready to hop on. But it's just something you really need to kind of think of, not just in the now, but 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years down the line, because that's when you're going to really see the ill consequences of your choices. It's not likely that you'll see ill consequences immediately. It's more likely going to be something down the track. Of course, there are certainly potential for ill consequences in the time of doing it, which you will also need to be careful of. But a lot of people make the decision based on what they want now. Typically, young people. Steroids are rampant through your adolescent ages at the moment, and at that particular age, your decisions are often quite often just made in the now with very little forethought on how they're going to impact your life further down the line. So that would be my first way. My first conversation I'd have with the client would be trying to assess if they truly actually have a long-term plan and have thought this decision through, rather than just a bit of a snap decision. And then perhaps you can't do this with all people, but if their goals are to be a professional powerlifter or a pro bodybuilder, and they've been doing things for 5-6 years, and if they haven't really gotten anywhere, then perhaps you might need to sit down and have a little bit of a conversation with them and say, look, maybe this isn't realistic. Maybe it's not worth the potential health consequences that are involved with these decisions. Are you sure this is something you really want to pursue? And then if you do choose to start light. Start with the least that you possibly can and work your way up. So that way, if you do kind of get somewhere where you're like, look, this isn't for me, you have more chance of being able to back out of it with less chance of side effect. But once you start, there's always a possibility for long-term side effects. That's something everyone should be aware of.
Yeah, I think what you said about it being popular amongst adolescents now, or just people being 17-year-olds and things like that, of the internet. I found it interesting with what Alison mentioned before. I'm very proud.
Hey, Jacob, get your thirst trap.
Oh, that is much better. Immediately.
Thirst quench.
Straight away. I found it interesting what Alison, you'd mentioned about the body dysmorphia side of things. Have you noticed a larger volume over maybe the last year or two in terms of the amount that you guys get through? Are you receiving a lot more, and are you noticing more of a trend these days? And obviously you don't really know exactly who's always sending you stuff and how old they are and what their psychological place is. But would you say that it's increasing in terms of the amount of people that are maybe taking that?
In terms of our sales, yeah, it's increasing. It's just going up all the time. In terms of age brackets, most of our customers are the vast majority are between 24 and 35. So that's the main group. There are a lot of teenagers as well, but trying to get them into the habit of testing is harder, I think, because they haven't had any health scares. But it's also, you want to get people to look at all the different kinds of risks that could happen. So you've got your health risks. Do you have family history of heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, liver issues, kidney issues? Any of your relatives have that, and you should be checking all of that out first. If you do have any of those, get that fixed first before you hop on gear. You also need to look at your mental health risks. So if you have anxiety or mental health problems, steroids are not going to help. They're going to do the exact opposite. And it's not just men. Women who take steroids will find their mental health gets affected quite nasty as well. So if you have a body dysmorphia issue as part of mental health problems, it's not going to get better with steroids. It's going to get worse.
Yep.
So that's something you need to be looking at before you jump on. And then from the mental health and medical risks, you've also got financial risks. You can lose a lot of money. So if you get scammed, and it's not a case of if, it's when and how bad. You are going to get scammed. Everyone I know has been scammed. Everyone. So websites are the worst. Don't ever buy off Instagram, Facebook, social media, TikTok, whatever. Just don't. You will be scammed by them. You need to have a look online. A lot of the forums discuss scammers. They won't know the recent ones because they're all still defending how great they are. So we've got a scammer list on our website that you can check to make sure that you're not using any of those particular websites. Never buy in bulk. For the first time you get from any supplier, buy a small amount and test it first. Make sure you're actually going to get something in the mail. So reduce your financial risk as well. So there's a lot of things that people should be looking at, not just, oh, Joe Bloggs looks great, I'm just going to do what he does. So, there's a lot that people should be thinking about.
Yeah, thorough health testing should be the first protocol for all all decisions made around these type of things. If you're at a particular high risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, something like that, then it's definitely something that should be thought about.
Also, if you're a heavy drinker.
Yeah. Other lifestyle choices as well, exactly, yeah. I'm of a big... it's not that you can't have a drink, maybe occasionally partake in recreational drugs from time to time, but you definitely don't want to be burning your candle from both ends and putting yourself under stress from anabolic steroids and performance-enhancing drugs, and then also consuming alcohol and recreational drugs at the same time. It's just a bit of a recipe for disaster. And if you want to talk about mental health, that sounds like a recipe for a very bad time. Very, very bad time.
Luckily, when it comes to getting blood tests and even possibly getting, your testosterone and things tested from your local GP, that's really easy to do. Luckily, all of them do it super easy, and all of them, say yes.
Yes.
Aren't we lucky in this healthcare system?
Yes. Jacob says in sarcasm, just in case anyone couldn't get that.
Sometimes I lay it on a bit thick. So that's a cool thing that I guess I would want to finish with. Let's say someone's sitting here and they're like, you know what, Connor and Alison, this is all good, but I've never had my bloods tested. How am I going to get them tested? And my doctor won't do it for me. Can you or do you have any recommendations of how someone can get it done off their own back?
Yep. So there are a few places that you can order blood tests through privately. The one I use the most with my clients is iScreen. If anyone wants blood work analysis and interpretation, they can reach out to me. I can also pass you a code to give you a slight discount on the blood work that I like done to get a comprehensive outlook on your health. There are some other private places. I think iRoids possibly is another one.
There's Roid Safe.
Roid Safe, that's the one. Roid Safe's another one.
They do Medicare funded ones, so it's a bit cheaper, but it is through Medicare.
Yep.
There's a code on our Instagram if you want 20% off that one.
There you go.
And there's also iMedical, which is another private one.
Yeah, iMedical iScreen. That's the same one one I was talking about as well. I have a practitioner account on that, so that's what I will use with my clients if their doctor is not willing. If this is something you're looking to do regularly, it's probably worth finding a doctor that will work with you though, because the blood tests, at least the ones that I have my clients do, are not cheap. You're looking about $500 for a panel. So if this is something that is a long-term decision, it's probably in your best interest to find a doctor that is willing to work with you and look after and monitor your health, along with you. So,
absolutely. Well, I must say this has been an eye-opening episode. I found out lots of things that I was not aware of, and I guess I'm not going to jump on pharma grade TRT now because it's probably not even going to be real. I was literally about to go do that straight after this. Look, I will say thank you very much, Connor and Alison, for being here. This podcast has been brought to you by PED Test Australia and Bulk Gym Chalk. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next one.